Collins, and I am the founder of NC Real Estate, which includes its members club for landlords and property investors. It's a place to come and build a profitable property portfolio that completely aligns with your goals. If you want to come out and find more about what I do, head on over to www.ncrealestate.co.uk. There is so much goodness over there that I think you will absolutely love. So, how have you enjoyed the last couple of weeks of podcasts? It's been awesome, hasn't it? This week, I am going one step further and bringing you another incredible guest, someone who I've been working with very closely over the last couple of months. I have got Verity Wakely from Douglas and Gordon with me today. She was the agent who has sold our flat in London, and we are so pleased that that's finally gone through. So, hi Verity, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Thank you for coming on.
No, thank you so much for having me. It seems quite surreal to say that it's all gone through, but I'm really happy.
It took so long, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, it was a really long process, but yeah, all done now, which is great.
All done and dusted. And for all of you, I mean, so many people who follow this have been asking me about the ins and outs of the deal. Once it is completed, we will then talk about it. We are still a couple of days away and it's Easter. So it's kind of delayed it for an extra couple of days. But because it exchanged last week, I'm absolutely over the moon about it.
No, it's great. It's so good. It was a complex deal, but we've got there.
We have got there. So because we've just done the sale of that flat, I invited Verity on today because I thought she would be very much best placed to tell us about what's going on, because there's been so much discussion in my Facebook group, Property Investment Mastery, where people who are buying and selling in London are having a completely different experience from people who are buying and selling in the north of the UK. And it seems to be that there's kind of a divide I've noticed almost running along the M4 corridor, where if you're investing above or you're buying property or you're selling property above, you're still kind of there at the top of the market. There's not really that good a deal to be had. And any clients that I've got who are buying in the north are really lucky if they get it under what asking value is, whereas in the south it seems to be a completely different picture. So I thought we'd have a conversation about that.
Yeah, perfect.
So
I'm happy to discuss it all with you.
fab. So to start off with, I want to know a bit more about you. How did you get started in property?
So I'll be honest, I didn't actually originally plan to end up in property. I finished university in 2011. I did a sociology degree and I had planned to be a social worker or something along those lines, but the job situation was really dire when I finished university. So I met with a recruitment consultant in London, and she kind of sold me the romantic idea of selling beautiful houses in central London, and I went to an interview and started sort of 2 weeks later and absolutely loved it. It wasn't what I planned to do, but it's such a great career.
And so have you been doing it ever since?
Yeah, so just over 7 years now I've been in property. I've always been based in South and Southwest and sort of West London. So yeah.
And those are beautiful places to be. So were you always south of the river, or have you been Chelsea, Kensington, Fulham, that area as well?
No, so I've always been south of the river. I'd love to work in areas like Chelsea and Kensington, but for me, it's always been south and southwest, and it's a little bit more of a normal market here. So we've still got, people having babies, getting married, getting divorced, and that's what I quite like. Life moves on in these areas. So we're dealing with a lot of first-time buyers. It's just, a bit more of a normal sales market.
And with actually surprising that you say that you're dealing with a lot of first-time buyers. I know that when Chris and I started looking at selling this flat, we were absolutely shocked at how much it was going to go for. And we were saying to each other, well, would we buy this flat again at the price that it's worth?
Yeah.
And it's kind of still a little bit of up for debate of whether we would or not. It's a fabulous location right next to the tube. Zone 2 is still amazing. But are you finding that a lot of first time buyers are still buying in the area because it's expensive still?
It is expensive. I think, if we compare it to areas like Chelsea and, even Fulham, it's affordable. And I know that sounds crazy. I mean, my parents are from Somerset, and when they look at the London prices, they almost fall off their chair. But
Mhm.
compared to central London, I'm based in Putney, it's still an affordable area. And a lot of the first time buyers we're dealing with, it's banks of mum and dad that are helping. So
Yeah.
they might have saved up some of their deposit, but a lot of parents are giving them that money because it's a huge amount of money. Um, it, you know,
Yeah.
it's 4 or 5 times people's salaries. So actually, it's a lot of parents helping.
Yeah. I mean, I think back to it when first bought my first flat in London, which to now sounds crazy. I bought my first flat in Notting Hill in 2011, and I bought it for
Wow.
£200,000.
It's crazy. You probably
It's
couldn't even get a garage for that now there.
no, definitely not. Definitely not. But it's interesting that you say that there's still first time buyers moving into the area because then that's a good sign that they're able to get the lending. And are they doing it with help to buy schemes?
Yeah, so we have dealt with a couple of help to buy schemes. I know, that's probably incentivized them. There's also, stamp duty relief for first time buyers if they buy below 500,000. So I think that might have boosted that end of the market. But I mean, ultimately, rents are so high in London. I
Hmm.
think um, if they have a deposit or if they can borrow it from parents, it makes sense for them to pay the mortgage repayments, which are
Yeah.
often a lot less than the rent each month. So I think it's still something people aspire to own a property, and it's more affordable than renting if you can do it.
Yeah. And would you say that that's kind of keeping the lower end of the market alive?
Yeah, yeah, I would. I think, a lot of people have said they still want to own a property, they still aspire to own a property in London, and it's cheaper for them. And that's definitely what's keeping that, that's where we probably sell most of our flats at that level. And that's what's been sort of churning a bit easier than the top end.
Yeah. And do you see many property investors coming through at the moment?
Um, we've seen a couple more dipping their toes in. I would
Hmm.
say, the last couple of years, it has been a little bit quieter. I think, with stamp duty changes, with the extra 3%, we kind of lost quite a few rental investors. So I would say we're starting to see it, but it hasn't been sort of like a light switch turning back on.
No, and especially with the changes to Section 21 this week, I think
Yeah.
a lot of landlords are thinking, "Whoa, do you know what? I don't want to pay that much, plus the additional stamp duty, plus it's becoming more risky to be a landlord. You'd rather hedge your bets a little bit and invest in a cheaper area, I guess."
Yeah, I think that's it. I think, I mean, we took out a couple of buyers yesterday. There are still buyers that were looking, for an investment property. We've got some cash buyers out at the moment, but I think it has made people question, especially if it is a buy to let investment, because it has to make financial sense.
Yeah, it does. And also, I found a lot with these new builds that are going up in the area as well. The service charge is really high. So uh, for the rent to cover the mortgage that you might need to pay, plus the fact that you've
Yeah.
got all these additional costs, plus the fact that service charges are spiraling, I guess it's cheaper in that area to be buying somewhere that is an older building rather than these new builds.
Absolutely. I would say the best investments are sort of the ex-council or purpose-built properties because normally the service charges are a lot lower. I know on some of these new builds it's sort of 3,000, 4,000 pounds, but you do get gym and swimming pool, but it's ridiculous.
It's
Um,
expensive.
I know
Especially
it's
because you can
crazy.
go down to Pure Gym and spend £25 a month on a membership.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, the things, purpose-built properties are great investments that are slightly older. We've got quite a few sort of like 1930s, 1960s blocks,
Mhm.
um, big double bedrooms, and they rent really well because they're
Yeah.
normally quite close to the stations. So I think they're sort of a really good investment.
And are they being priced cheaper than the new builds?
Yeah, they are. They're definitely more affordable. I think, the most expensive things like the Victorian period conversions. Some of the new builds are priced quite reasonably, but some of them are quite high. It
Yeah.
depends, who's built them and that sort of thing, or where they are. But I think the most reasonable ones are, sort of the purpose-built buildings, because pounds per square foot, they're a lot cheaper. They're normally bigger flats because it's not a building that's been sort of chunked up into properties. They've
Hmm.
been built to be sort of proper family homes.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you seen that the market is now changing in the area? Has it dropped over the last couple of months, or because all I hear from colleagues who work in London is that the market is falling, especially from people that I worked with who are working for the bigger estates in central London, so around Shoreditch and around Chelsea and Kensington, that area. They're saying, do you know what? Actually, if we have to sell something, we are having to give such a discount. And that's obviously reflected in then the market. It shows that prices are going down. Have you seen that everywhere, or does it really depend on the property?
Yeah, so it really depends on the area. I would say, a lot of that. I don't work in central London, but
Hmm.
I think, the demand has changed in central London. It was a lot of foreign investors, and they probably aren't in the market as much at the moment. So, if the demand goes down, prices change slightly. For my area, where I'm based in Putney in southwest London, it's been quite a stable and consistent couple of years. So we haven't really experienced growth, but we
Hmm.
haven't really experienced a decline either. It's just been, as I said earlier, life's moving on. People still want to get onto the property ladder. People are still having babies, and they have to move on with their lives. So
Yeah.
we, yeah, we probably have just seen things sort of ticking along. We saw the most growth in sort of 2014, 2015,
Hmm.
and then prices have just remained quite consistent since then, really.
And I guess it was always going to, because wages haven't gone up as much.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? The market went up. I mean, I was based in a different area, still in South London in 2014, 2015. Prices almost doubled in the
Yeah.
space of 6 months. It was crazy. As you said, you bought a property for 200,000 in
Yeah.
Notting Hill. I mean, that same flat, I wouldn't even hazard a guess what it's worth now, but it's probably, tripled, if more. And that's, the market has gone up a lot. And I think we're just in a sort of quite stable, consistent period at the moment.
Do you think we could ever see something similar again? And I know we don't have crystal balls. I say this every time. We can think about the future. We don't have crystal balls, but just in your opinion, not like actual fact, do you think we could
Yeah.
ever see something again like that again?
I mean, I think if you look at London compared to other large cities, for example, Singapore, Sydney, New York, we're still really affordable. And I know that sounds crazy, but we are still one of the cheapest large cities for real estate.
Hmm.
So I think, if you look at London every 5 to 10 years, it's only gone one way. I don't know if we're going to see prices doubling in the space of a year again, but I think there will be growth. I still think, London is a great place to invest in.
Yeah.
And if you look at basic supply and demand, we have got more people than ever moving to the city. I mean, everyone in my office, none of us are from London, and uh, we've got restrictions in London on building upwards, building downwards. There's not a lot of space, so
Yeah.
I think that naturally keeps prices high. And I think more people are going to keep coming here for jobs. So I do think prices will continue to go up. I just, I'm not sure if we'll see the same amount of growth that we've seen, 2014, 2015.
Yeah, unless we have a serious recession and prices crash, then we might see it. But I'm with you. Although every time I go to investor events and I speak to other investors, they say to me, "Do you know property prices going to fall off a cliff in London?" And I think, I don't know. I don't know. Like this 30% drop when we leave the EU, if we do leave the EU, what do you reckon?
I know. Again, it's difficult, isn't it? I've read so many conflicting things. It's very difficult to predict what will happen. Again, I think in areas where there people have to move on with their lives. I think things will carry along, quite stably and quite consistent. I don't know about areas in central London. I'm not sure, but I do just think that London is propped up by so many different things.
Yeah.
And so many different economies. It's not just British people buying here. Um,
No.
I can't see it dropping 30%. I think, for us, the biggest ricochet in the marketplace was when Brexit was announced, because people in London didn't expect it. So for us, the worst period was when they first announced it, and everyone just sat on their hands
Yeah.
because no one was expecting it. No one knew what was going to happen. But I think now people are kind of a little bit fed up with talking about Brexit, thinking about Brexit. And if you're having that baby, or you're moving for a school, you still need to move on with your life and do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. I think that the Brexit talk, there was a lot of scaremongering around it. Huge amount of
Yeah,
scaremongering around it. Um, and everybody was ready to up and leave really quickly. And since it's now been postponed to October, I think people are just bored.
yeah, absolutely. And no one really knows what's going to happen anyway, so I think people just need to move on with their lives. But I mean, we have seen the buyer levels are lower than we've seen in the previous years, but I think the buyers that are out at the moment are good buyers. So you haven't got any window shoppers. Anyone that's nervous at the moment isn't looking. So
Yeah.
we used to see maybe 20 viewings in a week. We'd have an open house on a Saturday and then loads of offers on the Monday. It now can take a couple of weeks for buyers to come through. They want to see everything at that level and then make offers. So it's just a bit more of a slower process
Hmm.
because it's a bit more of a buyer's market at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So let's have a talk about selling, because obviously we've just sold, and to make that property look good, I did had it fully repainted and I got it staged. Now, I know that that's not always necessary, and just from my point of view, it was kind of peace of mind as we were moving countries, and I knew that the day the removal men came to take our whole flat to New York, they took it all out, and I was like, "Oh, it's a state." You know what happens when people move, and you've got the marks on the wall, and all of the skirting boards are marked, and I'm quite a
Yeah,
perfectionist in that I could not have had my properties going to market like that. There was no way. I needed to look the best that it possibly could have been. Now,
yeah.
that's me being a perfectionist, and that's how I like to do things. But asking you, if anybody out there is looking to sell right now, what are your top tips for making sure that you get a good price for it, but also shifting it quickly?
I think you did the perfect thing. I actually would recommend that to everyone. It's like when you sell a car, you clean it, you get rid of the scratches, you make sure it looks perfect, you take out all the children's toys, or and I think my top tip would be to make sure it's looking its best. So you don't need to spend thousands of pounds on the property, but I would declutter. If it's
Hmm.
vacant, maybe put in a bed so people can sort of imagine themselves living there. The things that sell quickest for us are the things that look nice and people buy into the lifestyle, especially first time buyers. They don't have the appetite for a project. They want something that they can move straight into. They can imagine themselves having a glass of wine there. And
Yeah.
you really do have to make sure the property looks its best. So um that would be my number one tip. I think, secondly, you need brilliant photos, and
Hmm.
marketing is everything. And that could mean the difference from it going within a couple of weeks to it sitting around for a couple of months, because the internet is kind of a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
Everything's so accessible, and people could look at photos and say, "Oh, I'm not going to see that," and actually write it off without going through the door. So I think amazing pictures and making sure you use an agent that has, good marketing, good photos, is on the right websites as well,
Hmm.
just to give you the maximum exposure for the property.
Which
Um,
websites would you recommend?
yeah, so Rightmove, Zoopla on the market, prime location. I mean, we also advertise on Mumsnet, The Telegraph. I think you want to have as much exposure as possible. Some agents, I mean, we use Instagram and Facebook, and I think you need to make sure you're going to be out to the maximum amount of buyers that you can. So
Mhm.
you want to capture that whole audience, and you just need to make sure, double check that agent is going to get you the most exposure.
And
Um,
can I ask how you would, what should, so for anybody listening who is about to instruct an agent, what should they then be asking that agent, regardless of where they are in the country, to make sure that that agent is getting the most exposure? Sorry. And I know
yeah.
some people can think, oh, I don't know if I want to ask this, or I don't know what, I'm a bit nervous to ask. What would you expect someone to be asking you?
Yeah, so I definitely expect someone to be asking me about marketing, to find out what websites they're on, how we market a property. I'd also expect them to ask me how many buyers we have on our database.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, in my office in particular, my company, we share a database. So I'm able to pull buyers in from right across London in a couple of clicks. So you should find out if your agent's a franchise, if they just have one office.
Hmm.
The things that sell faster at the moment are on with agents with a huge database, because you'll often find that buyers will register in one area but end up buying in a different area. So we utilize that by calling through those buyers.
Hmm.
So you need to, find out how many buyers they've got access to, and find out about marketing. Find out how big their team is as well, how many people are going to be viewing it. A lot of agents, we work on commission, and if you have a bigger team, there are going to be more people competing to sell the property.
Yeah.
So you need to find out how many branches will market it, how big the team will be. I think they're sort of probably the most important things to establishing which agent to go with.
Hmm. And so if you then look online and you find that the pictures just aren't doing it justice, what what should you say to your agent? Can you ask them to go out and take more pictures?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I would never feel offended. I want my clients to be 100% happy with their photos. So you can
Mhm.
100% say to the agent, I'm not happy. Can you come and take some more pictures? Um, most properties have about 10 to 15 pictures on the website. You can put more on, but that's sort of the average. But yeah, absolutely ask them to do it. You don't, most agencies, you don't pay anything until it's sort of exchanged and completed. So
Mhm.
you need to be happy that you've got the best marketing and the best exposure for it.
Yeah. And then when it comes to the description, what should you be telling your agent so that they can write the best description?
Yeah, so I mean, with myself, I will ask people if there's anything particular they want in it, but we write them ourselves. So
Mhm.
I will go around looking at all the key selling points. So the way that we do it, we'll look at the key selling points. So, does it have off-street parking? Does it have a south-facing balcony? Does it have access to a swimming pool? You need to make sure it sells your property. A lot of people, I don't think they look at they go into the description in a great deal, but I think the key selling points on things like Rightmove and Zoopla, they're bullet pointed,
Yeah.
and you need to make sure they're the best things about your flat.
Mhm.
Is it close to the station? And again, you can ask your agent to put specific things in. If you want something written in the description, they will do it for you. Agents do it in slightly different ways. So some might just put bullet points. We like to do some key selling bullet points and then like a full description of the property. So we talk about the kitchen, the living room, and how the property sort of flows into each other, and does the balcony lead off. But you can really add what you want to on it.
Oh, okay. Fab. And then if you were then going to stage the property like I did, what would you as an agent expect me to be putting in there?
So if it was vacant, I would definitely recommend putting a bed in,
Yeah.
and you want to make sure that there's like a duvet and some cushions on the bed. It sounds really silly, but people buy into stuff like that. They want to imagine themselves living there.
Mhm.
So I'd also probably make sure there was a sofa and somewhere for dining as well. It's all about sort of selling that dream to them and making them realize that this is how the flat will be set up. I think sometimes vacant properties, people can't, they're like, oh no, the bed wouldn't fit in there, or
Mhm.
so you have to stage it, put cushions on the sofa. Again, not spending thousands. There are companies that you can pay to stage it for you.
Yeah.
Um, but I definitely think it gets you a sort of faster result.
And would you dress the windows? So would you put curtains and blinds?
I've had, I mean, not all of my sellers have done that. Some of them have gone for curtains, blinds, photos, the full paintings. I
Mhm.
had another client that didn't do that. She just had the sort of basic furniture, and it didn't make it a huge difference. I think because she had, beds and sofas and everything
Yeah.
else. I don't think you necessarily need to go for curtains and blinds.
And how long would you want the furniture to be in there? So I guess from the date that you take pictures, it's got to be there. But how long would you a- advise your clients to leave them? Because obviously, the more months they're in there, the higher for some companies it costs because you're paying on a monthly basis. So
Yeah.
when would you suggest then they take it back out?
I would probably recommend, once the mortgage offer is out, or, once you're close to exchange. And I know it's very difficult with the British system.
Yeah.
Nothing's guaranteed until it goes through. But you probably want to have some certainty that the transaction is going the way it's supposed to.
Mhm.
Searches are back, so they've paid for searches. They've had a survey. A survey is normally sort of £500, £1,000. So the buyer is as invested as he can be. They've kind of put the money where their mouth is.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Okay. So any other tips for making the property sell quickly? Anything about
Yeah.
pricing?
Yeah, so I think, you don't want to price yourself out of the marketplace. I need, obviously, you want to get the best price for your property, but you need to be realistic at the moment. The things that are sitting around for a long time are the things that have been priced too high, and we haven't got the traction on those. So you need to be quite realistic. I still think the prices are quite fair in London. As I said, in my area we haven't experienced a huge amount of growth, but
Mhm.
I still think they're quite fair prices. But I would recommend pricing at a fair level and not, you know, shooting it too high, because it will sit there for a long time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And anything else you can recommend for selling a property?
I I would say use a London-based solicitor for getting it to through quickly. I mean, it's one thing getting an offer agreed, but you don't want it to sit around for months and months. If you've used a solicitor outside of London, a conveyancing firm, good solicitors have made my deal so much quicker to go through. So I would definitely recommend using a London-based solicitor, and you might have to pay a little bit more,
Mhm.
but it really will make the process a lot easier. I mean, we obviously had quite a stressful deal with yours, but your solicitor was fantastic. And
Yeah.
um heaven forbid, if we hadn't have had her on it, it might have taken months longer.
Oh my gosh, yes, Nishita, honestly, is I've worked with Nishita for the past 10 years. I absolutely love her for having our back through everything, and she went the to the nth degree to make that deal
Yeah,
go through. I mean,
absolutely.
you did too. You did too. Between the pair of you, we can't thank you enough. But yeah, good solicitors, because that was the problem, wasn't it? Through the conveyancing process, was that the other side solicitor just wasn't at the mark.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a bad solicitor, as I said, I've lost deals because it's a bad solicitor, and you just need someone that's proactive. In the same way, you should have a proactive agent. I think at the moment, because the market has been a little bit tougher, you need people that are going to go above and beyond for you. Because that does make the difference. It could save you a couple of months. I know your deal was a little bit longer, but you need proactive people on your side.
That's so true. And for everybody listening, can I say that Verity would pick up the phone at like 9:30 at night to talk to me? I'm on New York time and she was still picking up the phone. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that so much. You did everything you possibly could to get it through. I honestly,
No.
I've been raving about you to everybody.
No, I'm happy to help. And I think, I deal with a lot of clients like yourselves. And, if it means that we get things done and sorted, that's all I want to do. I think, with my job, it's all about problem solving and it is really emotional and highly stressful. And I like to talk to my clients to, make sure we're on the same page. And I know it's hard. You're in New York. And for you, I've listened to some of your podcasts now as well. And I know it must have been really hard for you guys because you were trusting us to just sort things out for you, and it's kind of quite alienating. You were over there just thinking. So I wanted to take the phone call just to make sure you were sort of looped in on everything as well.
Thank you. We appreciate it so much, so much.
You're
And
welcome.
anybody listening, I'm going to put Verity's contact details below so you can email her if you'd like to use Verity as well. Um,
Absolutely.
so just speaking about the conveyancing process, and we had a lot of times where the buyer would come back to us and ask us for more and more money, which um, I mean, I've told everybody. Chris in the end got to a point where he's like, I'm not even talking about this anymore. But are you seeing that more often? Is this something that's now becoming common that buyers are just asking, 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 asking?
Yeah, I think at the moment, it is a little bit more of a buyer's market. So previously, sort of 2014, 2015, we would just say, take a view on it. You have to move forward. And we had maybe 50 buyers behind them queuing up. So people
Hmm.
did just push forward with things. Now, the banks are a little bit more cautious, and the solicitors are also, they have a duty of care to the banks and the buyer. And the banks are more cautious. They want more documents for the purchase. They want this indemnity policy. And so I think it's a mixture of banks being cautious, solicitors naturally being cautious. I think,
Hmm.
solicitors have always been cautious, but
Yeah.
now we're dealing with, a lot of older leases that might have faults in, and they're picking up on those problems. So the conveyancing process is taking longer, and more things are coming up that might not have come up a couple of years ago. But I think it's a mixture of all of those things, really.
Yeah. And so what would you advise a seller? Would you say to them, meet the buyer somewhere, or would you be like, just stand your ground?
Yeah, it really depends. It's a really difficult one. I think
Yeah.
at the moment, because buyers aren't growing on trees,
Hmm.
it's difficult. I think, yeah, there must be a happy middle ground, and I think, you know, depending on what it is, you can always say, look, we'll meet you halfway, or we'll give you X amount towards it, and that might just sort of knock the inquiry on its head. But it's very difficult, if the buyer has had a large discount from the asking price, it's then, well, when do you draw the line?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
It,
If you get that
yeah,
discount, you have to then go, actually, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get this through.
yeah, exactly. So I think, it's a case by case thing, but I would always sit down, and if you're dealing with an agent, they should go through it with you. What are the options? What are the scenarios, and what could happen? Because it's very different for every transaction. But I would say, try and offer something if it means the deal will go through.
Yeah.
But I know there's a limit. You don't want to be taking thousands and thousands off the asking price just for the sake of appeasing the buyer.
Hmm. And so, another question, would you recommend selling right now, or would you proceed with caution?
I think in my area, life has to move on, and
Yeah.
I people still need to move. I still think we're getting fair prices in the marketplace. At the higher end at the moment, there's a shortage of stock. We normally have about 44 pages of properties on Rightmove in Putney.
Yeah.
There are 21 pages at the moment. So um, that that is a blessing. So for sellers, there is a shortage of stock at the higher end of the marketplace. I think life has to move on. I don't
Yeah.
think we can sit here and wait and see what happens. It might get better, it might get worse. We don't know, and
Hmm.
that's the risk. I think if you're trading up at the moment, if you're in a flat and you want to buy a house, it's a great time to do it. So it really depends what your plan is. But I definitely think, life has to move on, and you can't just stay in the flat because you're worried about what's going to happen in the marketplace.
Hmm.
Um, I would definitely, move on with your life.
Yeah, if you need to sell, you've decided you've come to the end of the road of your property, then you could wait forever for the right time and still never get that price that you think. you
Yeah.
deserve, or you might as well give it a go. And there's always, I mean, always, if 3 months into the marketing process you think we're not getting what we want, you can always say, okay, I'll just come back to this in 12 months time.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And you just don't know, dip your toe in. If you don't get the level that you want, you can pull it off the marketplace. But I still think, as I said earlier, there are less buyers, but there are still good buyers out there.
Yeah. And so what do you reckon is going to happen 2019? How do you feel the market's going to go?
I I mean, I think it's gonna be quite a stable year. I think it's gonna follow quite a similar trend that we've seen the past couple of years. I don't see I mean, obviously Brexit has been pushed back, but I don't see there being any sort of light bulb moments. I think it's just gonna trickle along the way that we've seen it already. Um, yeah, I think that's sort of my outlook on it.
Mhm. And I'm going to ask you a final question, which I was meant to ask you at the beginning, but I got carried away.
It's
um,
fine.
w- Thinking about you being an agent, and I know that
Yeah.
I've got a lot of people who listen to this who are looking for careers in property or what they should do. I wonder if you could give any insight into what it's like being an agent, the skills you need to get into it, and if you would recommend it as kind of a first step into the property industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, for myself, I had a university degree when I came to be an agent, but a lot of people that start in the offices come straight from school.
Hmm.
A lot of large companies in London will give you on the job training. So you'll have probably a week or two of intense training in their head office. And then they'll sort of go through, you'll go out on viewings, you'll shadow them. So I think there are some transferable skills that you can probably get before becoming an agent if that's what you decide to do. And
Hmm.
I worked in retail, so customer service skills are paramount to our job.
Yeah.
Um, it's all about building relationships and trust and rapport. So I think if you work in a shop or a restaurant, all of those skills are really transferable. The rest you can kind of work on, but you also need to be really driven. Our job is commission based,
Hmm.
so you have to want to work when people finish work, which is probably 6 and 7 o'clock Saturdays. It's an incredibly rewarding career, but you do have to work quite hard. And I take calls for my clients in the evenings, but I do really enjoy the challenge and the reward at the end of it. There's nothing better than finding someone a new property, but you do have to work quite hard for it.
Yeah.
Um, but you don't need any specific, you don't have to necessarily have a degree. You can come straight from school, and most good big agencies will train you and give you the skills that you need.
Would you recommend it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, as I said, it wasn't what I expected to do, but it's been one of the best things I've done. I work with some amazing people. I've seen some incredible properties. I quite often get house envy, but I get to see some beautiful homes. I mean, it's not all smooth sailing. It can be incredibly stressful, and it's quite emotional dealing with people's
Yeah.
lives and their homes. But it's really rewarding. There's nothing better than moving someone into a new property. So I love it. No day is ever the same, and it's very very hectic. You could be out doing viewings, sat behind your desk. I think that's a nice thing for me. I can get out of the office, and it just kind of breaks up the day, and the days fly by.
Hmm. Brilliant. Well, there we have it. Thank you, Verity, for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And for everybody listening, I'm going to put Verity's details below if you want to get in contact with her for any reason. Verity is based at Douglas and Gordon in Putney, southwest London. So thank you, everybody, for listening to my podcast today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here listening with us. If you want to find out more about what I do, head on over to www.ncrealestate.co.uk and make sure you sign up for my newsletter, which comes out every Sunday evening at 7:30 p.m. It's one that you definitely want in your inbox. And finally, come and join me on Facebook in the Property Investment Mastery Facebook group. I will put the link below. It's a place for you to come and have those really meaningful conversations about property investment. Again, thank you for being with me today. I cannot wait to catch up with you again soon.